The best seed company in Nebraska put up $30,000 to prove no farmer could beat their hybrid. One man entered. He planted seeds his grandfather had carried across an ocean, and in the summer of 1979, when the rain stopped, everything they believed about corn fell apart. Let me take you back. In early 1979, Midwest Genetic Systems, MGS, was the dominant seed company in York County, Nebraska. They didn't just sell seed, they sold certainty. Their flagship hybrid, MGX12, was planted on nearly every serious farm in the county. High yield, uniform stands, strong disease resistance, predictable results. 8 years of breeding, hundreds of field trials, over $400,000 invested, and every chart told the same story. MGX12 outperformed everything else, every time. In a good year. And that was the assumption no one questioned. The man responsible for putting that seed in the ground was a regional sales representative named Richard Halverson, 45 years old, agronomy degree from Nebraska, and the kind of man who didn't just believe in data, he trusted it, completely. Richard didn't argue opinions. He showed numbers, yield comparisons, side-by-side plots, bushels per acre, profit margins. And every farmer who saw those numbers made the same decision. They switched. All but one. His name was Earl Kessler, 68 years old, farming the same 240 acres east of York since 1935. Same land, same soil, same seed. While everyone else upgraded to hybrids, Earl kept planting something older, something slower, something no company sold anymore. An open-pollinated corn variety his family had carried from Eastern Europe, across the Atlantic, decades before any hybrid company existed. Earl didn't buy seed. He grew it. Every fall, after harvest, he walked his fields by hand. Not fast, carefully. He didn't select from the bin. He selected from the standing plants, the strongest stalks, the healthiest ears, the ones that survived wind, heat, and everything the season threw at them. He marked them, harvested them separately, dried them slowly. Then in winter, he shelled them by hand, kept only the most uniform kernels, stored them in cloth bags, labeled by year, by weather, by memory. He had been doing this for over 40 years, not as tradition, as selection. Each year, the corn changed, not dramatically, but slightly, adapting to that exact soil, that exact climate, that exact farm. No lab could replicate that, because no lab had 40 years on one piece of ground. Richard Halverson had been trying to sell Earl hybrid seed since 1973. Every year, same conversation. You're losing yield, Richard would say. MGX12 will give you at least 12 more bushels per acre. On 240 acres, that was real money. But Earl always gave the same answer. My corn still works. That answer bothered Richard. Not because it was wrong, because it wasn't measurable. Fine isn't good enough, Richard told him one spring. Fine is what keeps you behind. Earl looked at him. How long has your seed been on this land? Richard hesitated. 8 years. Earl nodded. Mine's been here close to 90. Come back when yours knows this ground. Richard didn't have a response, but he had something else. An idea. In February of 1979, at a county fair planning meeting, he made a proposal. A public yield contest. Hybrid versus any farmer in the county. Same soil. Same planting date.
Same fertilizer. No excuses. And to make sure no one ignored it, he added a number. $30,000. If any farmer could beat MGX-12, they would take the money. If not, they would stand there and watch the future of farming prove itself. The room went quiet, because everyone already knew the outcome. Hybrids always won. That wasn't opinion. That was science. But Richard wasn't trying to prove science. He was trying to prove something else. That there was no reason left to farm the old way. And he knew exactly who would take the bet. A man with a cloth bag of seeds, and 40 years of quiet data no one had ever measured. Richard thought he was setting a trap. He didn't realize. He was walking into a test. He didn't understand. Before the drought came, before the bet mattered, before anyone in York County paid attention, there was the ritual. Not a method, not a system written in a book. A habit, repeated so many times, it stopped looking like work and started looking like instinct. Every October, after the combines were done and the dust had settled over the fields, Earl Kessler went back out. Alone. Not to harvest, to choose. He walked his rows the same way every year, slow, deliberate, looking at plants the way most farmers never did, not asking, how much did this yield? But, why did this survive? Which stalks stood straight after the wind? Which leaves stayed green longer into August? Which ears filled completely, even when the heat pressed everything else down? He wasn't selecting the biggest plants. He was selecting the ones that refused to fail. There's a difference, and most people never learn it. Earl did, because his father had shown him, and his father had learned it from his father, not in a classroom, in a field. He marked each plant with a strip of cloth, about 200 every year, never from one corner, never from one good patch. From across the entire field, because diversity wasn't an accident, it was protection. After harvest, those ears didn't go into the bin. They went into the crib, hung on racks, air-dried. No heat, no forced air, because heat made seeds weaker, and weak seeds didn't survive bad years. By December, Earl sat at a wooden table, with a bucket and his hands. He shelled every ear himself, listened to the sound of kernels breaking loose, felt their weight, their shape. He discarded the tips, discarded the butt ends, kept only the center rows, the most stable part of the ear, uniform, consistent, reliable. The kernels went into cloth bags, same bags his father had used, each one labeled, year, weather, notes. Dry July, late rain, strong roots. 40 years of records, not in spreadsheets, in memory, in handwriting, in repetition. What Earl was doing had a name, but he never used it. Genetic selection, not fast, not controlled, not optimized for yield charts, but relentless. Every year, the weakest traits disappeared, not because someone removed them in a lab, because they failed in the field, and failure was not allowed to reproduce. That's the difference. A hybrid is designed. Earl's corn was tested. Over and over again. Against wind, against heat, against years that didn't cooperate. And it learned, quietly. By the spring of 1979, that corn wasn't just a seed. It was a population.
Every plant slightly different, every plant carrying a different answer to the same problem. That mattered, because hybrids don't work that way. MGX12, the pride of Midwest genetic systems, was engineered for consistency. Every seed nearly identical, every plant responding the same way, at the same time. That's what made it powerful. In a good year, uniform emergence, uniform growth, uniform yield. But uniformity has a cost. When something goes wrong, everything goes wrong, together. Earl understood that, not from theory, from watching. He had seen wet years, dry years, years where nothing made sense. And every time, his field didn't respond the same way twice. Some plants failed, some adapted, some carried the next season forward. That wasn't inefficiency, that was insurance. By late April 1979, the contest plots were prepared. 2 fields, side by side, same soil type, same slope, same fertilizer, everything controlled, everything equal, except the seed. Richard Halverson stood at the edge of the plot as the planter moved through, confident. He had seen the data. He knew how this ended. Earl stood further back, holding one of his cloth bags, watching. Not the planter, the ground. Because to him, the outcome wasn't in the machine. It was already in the soil, and in the seeds, that had been learning that soil, for decades. By mid-May, both fields emerged. Green rows, straight lines. From the road, they looked almost identical. Almost. But Earl wasn't looking from the road. He walked into the rows, knelt down, touched the leaves, and after a few minutes, he knew something no one else did yet. This wasn't going to be a normal year. The soil felt wrong, too dry, too early. He stood up, looked at the horizon, and waited. The rain didn't stop all at once. It just didn't come. Late May passed, then June. Clouds formed, drifted, disappeared. And the soil started to give something back. Moisture. Slowly. Then faster. By mid-June, York County was running 30% below normal rainfall. Not a disaster. Not yet. Just enough to make farmers look at the sky a little longer than usual. Richard Halverson wasn't worried. He had seen dry starts before. MGX12 was bred for efficiency. Strong early growth, fast canopy. It would outgrow the stress. That's what the data said. And for a while, the data looked right. By late June, the hybrid plot was ahead. Taller, darker, more uniform. From the road, it looked perfect. Every plant the same height, same color, same structure. Like it had been printed. Earl's field didn't look like that. It never did. Some plants taller, some shorter. Leaves slightly different shades. Spacing not quite as precise. It looked uneven. Outdated. Farmers driving past slowed down. They didn't say much. But they didn't need to. Everyone could see the difference. And in June, the difference favored the hybrid. Richard saw it too. And he relaxed. This was how it always started. By early July, the pattern should have been locked in. Hybrid pulls ahead. Old seed falls behind. End of story. Except, this year didn't follow the script. Because July didn't bring rain. It brought heat. 90 degrees, then 95. Then higher. Day after day. The wind picked up, pulled moisture out of the soil faster than it could recover. And something began to happen in the hybrid plot. At first, it was subtle. Leaves started to curl. Just a little. Edges folding inward.
Reducing surface area. Trying to conserve water. Normal response. Expected. Then it spread. Row by row. Plant by plant. Until the entire field looked the same. Every leaf curled. Every stalk stressed. Uniform. Perfectly uniform. Richard walked the plot one afternoon. Bent down. Touched the leaves. Dry. Too dry. He looked across the field. And for the first time, he saw something he didn't like. There was no variation. No buffer. No plant that looked better than the others. They were all responding the same way. At the same time. And that meant they would all fail the same way too. Across the line, Earl's field told a different story. It didn't look better. It looked uneven. Plants curled early. Some stayed open. Some slowed down. Some kept growing. From a distance, it looked inconsistent. From up close, it looked alive. Earl walked the rows quietly. He didn't check everything. He checked differences. Because that's where the answers were. One plant struggling, another beside it still pushing upward. One shutting down, another holding green. The field wasn't failing. It was sorting itself. That's what diversity does. It doesn't prevent stress. It distributes it. By mid-July, the real problem began. Pollination. Corn has a window. A narrow one. When tassels release pollen, and silks are ready to receive it. If the timing misses, even by a few days, the ear doesn't fill. In the hybrid plot, everything was synchronized, which had always been an advantage. Until now. The stress delayed silk emergence, but the pollen came anyway. Fell, and was gone, before many silks ever appeared. Richard didn't need data to see it. He pulled back a husk. Half the year was empty. Missing kernels. Gaps where grain should have been. Uniform failure. Across the entire plot. Earl checked his field the same day, and saw something different. Nothing lined up. Some plants early, some late, some right on time. Pollen didn't drop all at once. It stretched. Across days. Sometimes over a week. So whenever a silk emerged, there was still pollen in the air. Not perfect ears. Not uniform. But filled. Consistently. Enough. By the end of July, the outcome wasn't obvious. Not yet. But something had shifted. The hybrid still looked better. Straighter. Cleaner. More professional. But inside the husk, it was already losing. Earl knew it. He didn't say anything. Didn't tell anyone. He just walked the field and waited for August. By August, the county already had an opinion. Most people believed the outcome was decided. They had seen the fields. Seen the height, the color, the uniform rows. And uniform always looked like success. The fair opened on August 14th. But nobody came for the rides. Or the livestock. They came for one thing. Saturday. The yield test. Word had spread beyond your county. Farmers drove in from surrounding counties. Some from over an hour away. By morning, the grandstand was full. 500 people. Standing, sitting, leaning against rails. Waiting. Not for entertainment, for proof. Richard Halverson stood near the edge of the plot. Wearing his company's shirt, clipboard in hand. From a distance, he still looked confident. Up close, something had changed. He had walked the field.
He had opened the ears. He had seen the gaps. But he also had something else. 7 years of data. And data said the hybrid should still win. Even in a bad year. Even with stress. Because hybrids were built for yield. Earl stood on the opposite side. No clipboard. No charts. Just a cloth seed bag, held in both hands. The same bag he used every year. The same bag he brought to the field, like it mattered. Because to him, it did. The extension agent, Dale Mercer, stepped forward. He would run the harvest. Neutral, measured, recorded. No arguments, no adjustments. Just numbers. The combine started. Low engine rumble, dust rising behind it. Plot A, MGX-12, the machine moved slowly through the rows. Uniform plants going in, uniform grain coming out. From the outside, it still looked strong. 20 minutes later, the hopper filled. Grain transferred, weighed, moisture tested. Dale wrote the number down. Didn't say anything. Then moved to plot B, Earl's field. The combine entered uneven rows, plants of different heights, different spacing. It didn't look impressive. It didn't look modern. It didn't look like it should win. But it fed the machine anyway. Steady, consistent. Grain filled the hopper, same process, same way, same moisture correction. Same silence. Dale stepped away from the scale, 2 cards in his hand. 500 people, went quiet. You could hear the wind. And the ticking of the engine cooling down. Dale walked to the front, looked at the first card. Plot A, Midwest Genetic Systems. MGX-12 Hybrid. He paused.
92 bushels per acre. A few nods. Respectable. Not great. But in a dry year, acceptable. Richard exhaled slightly. 92 might be enough. It should be enough. Dale lifted the second card. Plot B. Earl Kessler. Open pollinated dent. A longer pause. Then, 105 bushels per acre. Silence. Half a second. Then it broke. The grandstand exploded. Not applause. A roar. 500 people on their feet. Shouting. Laughing. Pointing at the field. Because they had just seen something they didn't believe was possible. An old seed beat modern science by 13 bushels in a year when everything should have favored the hybrid. Richard didn't move. The clipboard hung at his side. He stared at the numbers, as if they might change. They didn't. Earl didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't say anything. He just nodded once, like a man hearing something confirmed that he already knew. Because to him, this wasn't a surprise. It was a pattern, and the pattern had just played out, in front of 500 witnesses. The $30,000 wasn't the story. It never was. But what Earl did with it was, Midwest Genetic Systems honored the bet. They had no choice. The test was public. The rules were clear. The numbers didn't lie. 3 days later, Richard Halverson drove out to Earl's farm. Alone. No company truck. No charts. No sales pitch. Just an envelope. He knocked once. Earl opened the door. Richard handed in the check. $30,000. Neither man said anything for a moment. Then Richard spoke. You won in a bad year. A pause. In a normal year, our hybrid would still beat you. Earl nodded. That's true. Another pause. Richard frowned slightly. Then why did you enter? Earl looked past him, out toward the fields. Because the fields were the answer. You built your seed for the best year, he said. I built mine for the worst one. Richard didn't respond. So Earl kept going. When everything goes right, your corn wins. When something goes wrong, mine survives. And farming isn't about the good years. It's about the ones that decide whether you come back next spring. The room stayed quiet. Because that wasn't in any chart. It wasn't in any yield trial. And it wasn't something Richard had ever been trained to measure. What are you going to do with the money? He asked. Earl looked at the cloth bag on the table. The same one he'd held at the fair. I'm going to protect what you can't sell. That fall, Earl built something no one in the county expected. Not a new barn. Not bigger equipment. A seed room. Insulated. Ventilated. Shelves built by hand. And on those shelves, cloth bags. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Not just his own corn. Other varieties. Old dent lines. Flint corn. Popcorn. Field corn from farms that had stopped saving seed. Every bag labeled. Every bag alive. It wasn't storage. It was a library. A collection of possibilities. Because Earl had seen something most farmers hadn't. Uniformity wins, until it doesn't. And when it fails everywhere. At the same time, across every acre planted the same way. Diversity doesn't look efficient. It doesn't look clean. But it doesn't fail all at once either. It bends. It shifts. It adapts. It survives. Richard drove back that afternoon, without turning on the radio. Because something had changed. Not the numbers. The assumption behind them. For years, he had told farmers to plant the same thing everywhere. Consistency. Predictability. Control. But standing in Earl's kitchen, he realized something else. One answer was not a strategy. It was a risk. Within 3 years, Richard left Midwest Genetic Systems. He didn't quit farming. He changed how he advised it. His recommendation became simple. Plant your hybrid. Just don't trust it with everything. He never mentioned Earl by name. He didn't need to. 500 people had already seen it. Earl farmed until 1986, his son took over. And the seed room stayed. Growing. Expanding. Until one day, it held more than 100 varieties. Each one a different answer to a different kind of year. When Earl died in 1993, they didn't talk about his yield. They didn't talk about the $30,000. They talked about the bag. The cloth bag he carried to the fair. The one his father used. The one his grandfather filled before crossing an ocean. Because inside that bag wasn't just seed. It was time. It was memory. It was adaptation, written slowly over generations. And no company, no matter how advanced, could manufacture that overnight. So let me leave you with this. Right now, somewhere, someone is being told, there's only one right way to do something. One system. One method, one answer. And it works. Until the year it doesn't.
A seed company bet $30,000 that modern science couldn't be beaten. They were right in the best year. They were wrong in the one that mattered. Because the hybrid was built to perform. But the old seed was built to endure. And in farming, endurance is what keeps you alive.